Olivia lost her clients, her partners, and her shop in 3 months. She never knew why. Christian didn't know his mother was the reason, until he found her selling flowers from a market stall. Olivia Sterling stood behind the counter of her small conceptual flower shop in East London, her hands still carrying the faint scent of crushed peonies and eucalyptus. The shop was narrow, slightly chaotic in its artistic arrangement, but every corner reflected her intention. Flowers were not decoration here, they were language. She was finishing a late arrangement for a local gallery when the bell above the door rang softly, breaking the quiet rhythm of her evening. A courier handed her an envelope stamped with an unfamiliar crest. Thick paper. Expensive. The kind that, when they finally looked at each other directly, it wasn't curiosity anymore. It was something sharper. Awareness. Neither of them tried to convert the other. Instead, they compared realities. You organize space like you're afraid of chaos, Olivia said one evening while watching him adjust a glass on a rooftop table. I organize space so chaos doesn't decide for me, Christian replied. That's still fear, she said. He didn't argue. That was the difference between him and most people she had met. He didn't defend everything. In return, he noticed things about her world she didn't expect him to care about. The way she spoke to vendors. The way she remembered names instead of roles. The way she treated imperfection as part of design rather than failure. It unsettled him more than he admitted. After 2 weeks, they made an unspoken agreement without ever calling it one. No hidden agendas. No financial assumptions. No past excavation unless willingly shared. It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a boundary structure. But for both of them, it functioned like trust. One night, standing outside a small gallery after closing hours, Christian said it first in a way that sounded almost accidental. I don't lie about money. Olivia looked at him. That's not the same as honesty. I know, he said, but it's where I start. She nodded slowly. Then we start there. There was something almost fragile about how easily they accepted that limitation. Not because it was ideal, but because it was real. Over the following days, they moved through the city like two separate systems, briefly learning each other's rules. There was no merging, only translation. Christian showed her places where silence was a currency. Olivia showed him places where noise meant life was still happening. At one point, sitting on the steps of an old East London building covered in fading murals, Christian asked a question he had been avoiding. Do you ever feel like you're building something that can't survive outside of your space? Olivia didn't answer immediately. She looked at the paint peeling on the wall, at the people passing without noticing the art around them. Everything I build survives, she said. Just not always in the same form. That stayed with him longer than he expected, because it implied adaptation, not loss. And that was unfamiliar to him. Their connection did not escalate in dramatic moments. It deepened through repetition, meeting, talking, observing, returning. There was physical attraction, yes, but it did not dominate the structure between them. What dominated was recognition of difference without rejection. And slowly, without either of them explicitly naming it, something fragile formed. A shared belief that honesty, if maintained carefully enough, might hold two incompatible worlds in temporary balance. Christian did not warn Olivia about the meeting in advance. He only said, as they were leaving a quiet dinner in central London, tomorrow evening. My mother wants to meet you. There was no softness in the sentence. No framing it as optional. Just information delivered like a scheduled event. Olivia stopped walking for half a second. Your mother? Yes. That's not a casual introduction. Christian glanced at her briefly. Nothing in my family is casual. That should have been a warning. It was, but not enough to change anything. The Ashford estate was outside the city, detached from London's noise in a way that felt intentional. The house was not large in the modern sense. It was controlled. Every line, every light, every silence inside it suggested history that had never been interrupted. Lady Eleanor Ashford received Olivia in the drawing room. She did not rise immediately. She observed first. Eleanor was composed in a way that did not require movement. Everything about her was stillness with purpose. Her presence didn't fill the room. It defined its limits. So, she said at last, looking at Olivia as if she were assessing a detail in an unfinished document. This is her. Christian stood slightly behind Olivia, not intervening, not protecting, not introducing. That itself was information. Olivia met Eleanor's gaze directly. Good evening. Polite. Neutral. Controlled. Eleanor smiled faintly. It was not warmth. It was recognition of structure. They spoke at first about irrelevant things: London weather, the event industry, cultural shifts. Eleanor asked questions that sounded casual but weren't. Every answer Olivia gave was stored, weighed, categorized. Christian remained silent more than he spoke. That was the first fracture in Olivia's perception of him in this environment. He was not leading this room. He was inside it. At no point did Eleanor openly attack. That would have been crude. Instead, she guided the conversation like a slow architectural demolition of assumptions. Your business is independent, Eleanor said at one point. Yes, Olivia replied. Self-funded. Yes. Eleanor nodded as if confirming a fact she already expected. That must require resilience. It was not a compliment. It was a classification. After dinner, while Christian briefly stepped away, Eleanor changed the tone entirely without changing her voice. She led Olivia into a hallway lined with portraits. This family, Eleanor said calmly, has always understood continuity. She stopped in front of a framed genealogy display. Not dramatic, not hidden, visible. Carefully curated lineage, titles, names, marriages, structure presented as identity. Eleanor gestured lightly toward it. There is very little space for improvisation and continuity. Olivia understood immediately what this was. Not a threat, a mapping. You're very young to think you can define yourself outside systems like this, Eleanor added gently. Olivia kept her expression steady. I don't define myself against systems. A pause. I define myself without needing them. That was the first real crack in Eleanor's calm. Not visible as emotion, visible as recalibration. Christian returned at that moment. He looked between them, sensing the shift but not yet understanding its shape. Eleanor smiled again, perfectly composed. Christian, she said softly, you've always had a tendency to admire things that don't belong where you place them. The sentence was delivered without accusation. That made it sharper. On the way out, Eleanor did not raise her voice, did not forbid anything, did not demand separation. Instead, she did something more precise. She made Olivia feel observed beyond the room, not as guest, as variable. When they left the estate, Christian finally spoke. She's not trying to scare you, he said. Olivia looked at him. I know. A pause. She's measuring where I break, she added. Christian didn't respond immediately. That silence was not agreement. It was recognition he did not want to admit yet. And for the first time since Mayfair, something shifted subtly between them. Not attraction, not distance, but awareness that one of them was still inside a system the other had never been fully shown. And that system had just acknowledged her existence. It started without confrontation. That was how Olivia first knew it wasn't coincidence. Two of her largest repeat clients, both long-term, both stable, both verbally committed to upcoming seasonal installations, canceled within the same 48 hours. No clear reason. Just budget restructuring and internal changes. Then came the inspection notice. Tax authority. Formal. Clean. Correctly documented. Too correct. Olivia stood inside her shop, reading the letter a second time, noticing how carefully ordinary it looked. Paper designed to feel neutral, almost accidental. But nothing about it felt accidental. By the end of the week, another cancellation arrived. Then another. Small independent partnerships that had always relied on her floral installations suddenly decided to go in a different artistic direction. She didn't need proof to understand pattern. Christian noticed the change in her before she told him. You're not sleeping, he said one evening when they met briefly near the river. I'm sleeping, Olivia replied. Just not well. That's not the same thing. She looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. Something is happening to my business. Christian frowned slightly. Like what? Pressure. Administrative pressure. Client withdrawal. Too coordinated to be organic. He didn't answer immediately. That pause mattered more than words. Eleanor wouldn't do that, he said finally. Olivia didn't react outwardly, but something in her expression tightened. You're already defending her, she said quietly. I'm not defending her, Christian replied. I'm saying there are other explanations. Like what? Olivia asked. He didn't have one ready. Deep down, a part of him recognized the Ashford signature in these coincidences, but acknowledging it meant admitting his entire life was built on such quiet assassinations. He chose to look away, not out of ignorance, but out of fear. And that silence created the first real fracture between them. Because for Olivia, the pattern was visible. For Christian, it was still unacceptable. Over the next days, Olivia continued working through the instability. She adjusted pricing, renegotiated suppliers, tried to stabilize what could still be controlled. But every adjustment revealed another pressure point, another small loss that accumulated into something structural. At night, she walked through her shop alone, touching arrangements she had created weeks earlier, now feeling like they belonged to a version of her life that was already being erased. Christian visited less frequently during this period, not because he withdrew, but because he was processing something he didn't yet name. When they did meet, the conversations changed. Shorter, more cautious, less direct eye contact. One evening, Olivia finally said it. "If your mother is involved, I need you to say it clearly." Christian exhaled slowly. "I don't know that she is." "That's not an answer." "I don't have evidence." Olivia stepped closer. "I don't need your evidence. I need your clarity." Christian's jaw tightened slightly. "You're asking me to accuse my mother based on pattern recognition. I'm asking you to recognize what I'm living through." A silence expanded between them. Not loud, not dramatic, structural. Christian looked away briefly, then back. "I can't assume intent without proof," he said. That sentence landed differently than he intended. Because what Olivia heard was not neutrality. It was distance. After that conversation, something shifted in how she saw him. Not as ally, as someone still protected by a system she was now being pressured by. And in parallel, Christian began to feel something he had not experienced before. Uncertainty about whether neutrality was the same as fairness. The business pressure did not stop. It didn't escalate dramatically. It simply continued, consistent, quiet, cumulative. And that, more than anything, made it effective. Because it was not one blow. It was structure collapse disguised as routine change. And neither of them could yet fully admit who had designed it. Lady Eleanor Ashford did not need to confront Olivia directly anymore. She had already entered her space. Now she only had to let the pressure settle. The invitation arrived on thick cream paper, delivered by courier, identical in elegance to the first commission Olivia had ever received from Mayfair. The handwriting was precise, controlled. A charity auction, hosted by the Ashford Foundation. Christian saw the invitation before Olivia did. He was the one who mentioned it first, as if trying to normalize it. "It's a public event," he said. "You don't have to stay long." Olivia read the card twice. "I know what it is," she said. Christian looked at her. "It's charity fundraising." "It's positioning," she corrected. He didn't respond immediately. That was becoming more common between them. The event itself was staged in a historic hall, polished to the point of emotional neutrality. Olivia arrived with Christian. That alone was enough for attention. She could feel it immediately, the shift in gaze density, the recalibration of social space around her presence. Not hostility, measurement. Eleanor greeted her warmly. Too warmly. "Olivia," she said, as if they had known each other longer than they had. "I'm so glad you came." No mention of past tension. No acknowledgement of distance. Perfect social continuity. Christian stood slightly to the side, observing rather than intervening. That was important. Because Olivia noticed something she had not fully registered before. In this environment, Christian was not a shield. He was a participant. The auction began. Everything proceeded with practiced elegance, donations, polite applause, and the kind of choreographed generosity that felt more like a tax requirement than a gift. Then Eleanor made her move. She invited Olivia to present a small floral installation representing emotional renewal. It was framed as opportunity, but it was placement. Olivia stepped forward. The room quieted in a way that was not silence. It was focus. She began speaking briefly about her work, about transformation through impermanence. Her voice was steady, controlled, but Eleanor was watching not her words. She was watching reaction, a subtle misstep in phrasing, a micro delay in response to a question about formal partnerships with aristocratic clients. The room noticed before Olivia did. A few soft smiles. Not cruel. Worse, polite correction of status. When she finished, there was applause. Correct. Measured. Safe. But something had shifted. Christian approached her afterward. "You handled it well," he said. Olivia looked at him. "That wasn't the point," she replied. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," she said quietly. He didn't answer. Later that evening, Eleanor found Olivia alone near a side corridor. No audience this time, just proximity. I hope you didn't feel uncomfortable, Eleanor said gently. I felt evaluated, Olivia replied. Eleanor smiled faintly. We are always evaluated. Some of us simply learn to enjoy it. Olivia held her gaze. Is that what you think this is? An audition? Eleanor tilted her head slightly. Not an audition. A pause. A clarification. The word landed with precision. Christian appeared at the end of the corridor at that moment, but he did not interrupt. That detail mattered, because Olivia saw it, and Eleanor saw that she saw it. No escalation followed. No confrontation. Only controlled social closure. But the effect remained after they left. In the car back, silence filled the space between them. Not peaceful silence. Occupied silence. Finally, Olivia spoke. You didn't stop it. Christian kept his eyes forward. Stop what? That. A pause. I saw it, Olivia. I just didn't know how to fight a ghost without becoming one myself, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. That sentence changed something irreversible in the structure between them. Not loudly, not visibly, but permanently, because it revealed the gap that neither of them had admitted yet. Olivia was now inside the system. Christian still believed he was observing it from within. Christian first met Victoria Ashford as if it were incidental. That was how it was framed. A private dinner, arranged under the pretext of business continuity for a family-linked investment group. Olivia wasn't originally meant to be present, but she was invited at the last moment, carefully, politely, as if inclusion was an afterthought rather than intention. Victoria was already there when they arrived. She stood to greet them with practiced ease, elegant, composed, visually aligned with every expectation the Ashford name carried. Not louder than the room. Not softer. Precisely calibrated. Christian, she said warmly. It's been too long. Then her gaze shifted to Olivia. A pause, measured, almost imperceptible. And you must be Olivia. No surprise. No curiosity that felt genuine. Recognition without unfamiliarity. That was the first warning Olivia registered. People don't look at strangers like that unless they've already been discussed. Dinner unfolded with controlled fluidity. Victoria spoke easily about markets, philanthropic strategy, and long-term family partnerships. She didn't interrupt. She didn't dominate. She positioned every sentence in a way that made others complete her logic for her. Eleanor watched her more than anyone else. Christian responded to Victoria with familiarity that Olivia couldn't immediately place. Not intimacy, but history. Shared reference points. Social fluency born from repetition, not introduction. Olivia noticed the imbalance before it was acknowledged. Victoria leaned slightly toward Christian during a conversation about upcoming estate restructuring. You still spend too much time avoiding the obvious, she said lightly. Christian gave a faint half-smile. And you still assume I haven't considered it. No, Victoria replied. I assume you have. You just haven't accepted it. Olivia remained silent, but she was no longer fully inside the conversation. She was observing it from the outside. Eleanor noticed that shift, and that was enough. Later in the evening, Victoria and Christian were briefly left alone in a side discussion about legal frameworks tied to family assets. It was framed as necessary continuity. Practical. Harmless. Olivia watched from across the room. They didn't touch. They didn't need to. Because what was happening wasn't physical proximity. It was narrative reinforcement. They spoke like people who had already been placed into the same future structure and were simply adjusting details. Victoria caught Olivia's eye for a second, a flash of weary understanding passing between them. She wasn't an enemy. She was simply another piece of the puzzle that Eleanor had already solved. When Olivia joined them again, Victoria turned toward her with a soft, perfectly neutral smile. You have a very distinct aesthetic approach, she said. Thank you, Olivia replied. It's refreshing, Victoria continued. Christian's world can be structurally conservative. Christian glanced at Victoria briefly, not correcting her. That detail stayed with Olivia longer than anything else in the sentence. Eleanor later ensured that Olivia heard what she needed to hear without ever saying it directly. A comment during a quiet moment near the staircase. Victoria understands continuity, Eleanor said softly, almost conversationally. It's not something you can learn quickly. It's inherited in behavior, not intention. Olivia looked at her. You're comparing us, she said. Eleanor didn't deny it. I'm observing outcomes, she replied. That was the shift. Not confrontation. Replacement modeling. Back in the car that night, Olivia remained silent for a long time. Christian eventually spoke. "She's not involved in anything happening to your business," he said. Olivia didn't look at him. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" A pause. "It's structure," she said quietly. "You're being guided towards something, and I'm being measured against it." Christian exhaled slightly. "That's not how my family works." Olivia finally turned toward him. "That's exactly how your family works," she said. "You just call it differently." Silence followed. Not disagreement. Recognition they weren't yet ready to resolve. And somewhere behind both of them, without direct presence, the system had already begun assigning roles that neither had formally accepted. Olivia knew something had shifted the moment she received the message. It wasn't from Christian. It came from an unknown number, but the tone was unmistakably controlled, structured language, no emotional waste, no informal softness. "Meet me." One conversation. "No, Christian." The location followed immediately. She didn't respond at first. Not because she was unsure, but because she already understood what kind of conversation it would be. Still, she went. The hotel suite was in Mayfair, high above the street noise, designed for privacy rather than comfort. Lady Eleanor Ashford was already there. Sitting. Waiting. Not impatient. Not curious. Certain. Olivia didn't sit immediately. Eleanor gestured slightly. "Please." A pause. Olivia remained standing. Eleanor studied her for a moment, then accepted the adjustment without comment. That flexibility was more revealing than resistance would have been. "I'll be direct," Eleanor said calmly. "You are not suitable for this family structure." No hostility, just classification. Olivia didn't react outwardly. "And this meeting is for what purpose?" "To prevent unnecessary damage," Eleanor replied. A thin envelope appeared on the table. Not dramatic. Precise placement. Eleanor slid it forward slightly, but did not force it. Inside was a deed for a long-term lease on a prestigious studio space in Paris, fully funded for 3 years. It wasn't a bribe. It was an extraction disguised as an opportunity. "Take it," Eleanor said. "Leave London's dependency loop. Build something elsewhere. You are capable of that. Just not here." Olivia didn't touch the envelope. "You're trying to buy distance," she said quietly. "I'm offering you the scale your talent deserves, provided it exists where it cannot interfere with the Ashford trajectory." Eleanor corrected. A pause. Olivia finally looked directly at her. "At what cost?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Continuity requires removal of instability factors." The wording was deliberate, not emotional. Systemic. Olivia understood immediately what instability factor meant. Not her business. Not her presence. Her position relative to Christian. Eleanor continued, voice still controlled. "If you stay, your business will continue to experience administrative pressure. Your partnerships will remain unreliable. Your reputation will become fragmented, not destroyed, just sufficiently unstable that expansion becomes impossible." A pause. "This is not a threat," she added softly. "It is a forecast." Olivia finally stepped closer to the table. Not to accept, to see it clearly. "And Christian knows you're doing this?" she asked. Eleanor's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Not guilt. Assessment of timing. "No," she said. That single word mattered more than anything else in the room, because it confirmed separation of awareness. Eleanor leaned slightly forward. "He will eventually understand," she continued. "But by then, the structure will already have adapted." Olivia exhaled slowly. "So this is what you do," she said. "You remove people quietly until the system stops resisting you." Eleanor didn't deny it. "I preserve systems that work," she replied. A silence expanded between them. Then Eleanor added, almost gently, "You are asking to remain inside something that was never designed to include you permanently." Olivia looked at the envelope again, still untouched. Then she stepped back. "No," she said quietly. Eleanor studied her. "No," she repeated. "I'm not leaving," Olivia said. A pause. "Then you misunderstand the offer," Eleanor replied. Olivia's voice remained steady. "I understand it perfectly." Another silence. Not tension. Decision recognition. When Olivia left the suite, she did not take the envelope. The corridor outside felt colder than it should have, as if the building itself had adjusted its internal temperature after her refusal. She didn't call Christian immediately. She didn't need to, because now she understood something fully. This was no longer indirect pressure. It was a structured choice being forced into existence between two incompatible systems. And only one of them was still pretending it wasn't a war. Christian did not see Olivia for 3 days. At first, he assumed distance. Then conflict. Then something unresolved that would resolve itself. That was his mistake. Because by the time he understood it was not silence but collapse, the structure around both of them had already shifted beyond casual repair. Olivia's shop was gone when she arrived in the morning. Not physically destroyed. Not violently removed. Legally erased. A termination notice on the door. Lease reassigned. Accounts frozen under administrative review. Suppliers informed of compliance irregularities that were never clearly defined. Everything clean. Everything irreversible. Olivia stood in front of the locked glass door for a long time without moving. No breakdown. No visible reaction. Only stillness that gradually stopped being human in its rhythm. Inside the space where her work used to exist, nothing had been broken. That was the most precise part. Even the absence was organized. She didn't call anyone. Not immediately. Instead, she walked through East London streets that suddenly felt unrelated to her. People passed her without noticing the shift that had just occurred in her life. That was what made it worse. Everything continued functioning as if nothing had been removed. By evening, she was no longer an owner of anything. Just someone moving through a city that still recognized her name, but not her position. Christian found out late. Not from her. From a brief message forwarded through internal legal channels referencing termination of tenancy due to regulatory alignment. He read it twice before he understood what it meant. Then he called her. Once. Twice. No answer. That was the first time he felt something close to panic. Not emotional, but structural disorientation. Because Olivia did not behave like absence. She behaved like interruption. He went to her flat. Empty. No signs of sudden departure. No dramatic exit. Just reduction of presence. That night, Christian went to his family estate. He did not plan to confront immediately. He planned to understand. But Eleanor was already aware he would come. She was waiting in the same room where Olivia had once been evaluated. Calm. Composed. Something has happened, Christian said immediately. Eleanor looked up from a document. Yes, she replied. Where is she? A pause. Not here, Eleanor said. That was not an answer. Christian stepped forward. What did you do? Eleanor finally met his gaze. I corrected an unstable variable, she said. Christian's expression tightened. Olivia is not a variable. Eleanor didn't react to the emotion. That is where you are mistaken, she replied. Silence followed. Not dramatic. Finalizing. Christian exhaled slowly. You removed her business. I removed dependency leverage, Eleanor corrected. That's the same thing. No, Eleanor said calmly. One is emotional framing. The other is operational reality. Christian looked at her for a long moment. Something in him shifted, not suddenly, but structurally. You didn't just target her, he said quietly. You isolated her. Eleanor's expression remained steady. I ensured long-term clarity, she replied. That sentence broke something that had remained intact in Christian for years. Not trust in his mother, but belief in neutrality. He turned away without another word. The next days were not loud. They were empty. Christian tried to locate Olivia through every channel available to him. Each path led to partial dead ends. Information blocked, accounts restricted, conversations redirected into ambiguity. No one openly admitted interference. But nothing was accessible. That was when he understood the shape of it. Not conflict. Containment. Olivia, meanwhile, moved through temporary work without identity anchors. She took a job in a small florist stall that had nothing to do with her previous scale. No recognition. No ownership. Just repetition. And silence. One evening, she stood alone after closing, staring at flowers she did not choose, arranging them out of habit rather than purpose. Looking at the cheap, wilted stems under the harsh fluorescent light, she finally allowed herself to acknowledge something simple. She had been removed from the system entirely. Not defeated, but erased. Christian found her in that moment of recognition, watching through the glass of the stall. He didn't see the conceptual architect he had met in Mayfair. He saw a woman whose hands were trembling as she tried to force a bruised rose into alignment. It was in that sight, the raw, unpolished reality of the struggle his family's stability had forced upon her, that the last thread of his loyalty snapped. Not defeated in argument. Not outcompete. Displaced. Far away, Christian made a decision he had avoided for years. Not emotional, structural, and it had nothing to do with asking permission. Christian stopped looking for permission after he found the first inconsistency. It was a small thing at first, an internal transaction record that shouldn't have been accessible to him without escalation. A flagged advisory note attached to Olivia's lease termination that was routed through channels that did not match standard procedure. It wasn't the content that mattered. It was the path. He followed it anyway. Each step deeper didn't reveal a single act of aggression. It revealed structure, clean approvals, outsourced compliance decisions, third-party administrative reviews that all converged on the same outcome without a single explicit order written in Eleanor's name. It was not direct command. It was system orchestration. And every path, when traced fully, ended in influence points tied back to the Ashford network. Christian didn't react immediately. He observed longer than he had ever observed anything in his life. Because understanding it fully meant accepting something irreversible. This wasn't improvisation from his mother. It was design. That night, he returned to the estate. Eleanor was expecting him again. She always was. "You've been digging," she said calmly as he entered. Christian didn't sit. "Did you interfere with Olivia's business?" Eleanor didn't hesitate. "I ensured stability." "That's not an answer." "It is," she replied. "You're choosing to interpret it emotionally." Christian's voice tightened. "You destroyed her livelihood." "I redirected pressure that was already building," Eleanor said. "That's a lie." A pause. Not defensive. Measured. Eleanor studied him carefully now, like a variable that had finally stopped behaving predictably. "Christian," she said softly, "you are confusing attachment with objectivity." He laughed once, without humor. "No," he replied. "For the first time, I'm not confusing anything." That was the shift. Not anger. Clarity. He placed a printed document on the table between them. Transaction pathways. Legal routing. Communication chains. Eleanor looked at it briefly, then back at him. "You went through restricted systems," she said. "Yes," Christian replied. A pause. "You are no longer operating within your assigned access level." "I don't care," he said. That sentence changed the room, because it was the first time he had ever said something that removed himself from her framework entirely. Eleanor stood slowly. "You are risking structural instability in a system that supports more than your personal interests," she said. Christian stepped closer. "You call it structure," he said quietly. "I call it control disguised as continuity." Silence. The air between them tightened, not emotionally, but logically. Two incompatible models no longer able to reconcile language. "You will regret this path," Eleanor said. Christian shook his head slightly. "No," he replied. "I already regret the one where I believed neutrality was harmless." That was the moment he broke from the system completely. Not symbolically. Formally. Within days, he initiated a legal and financial separation process. Access restrictions, inheritance disclaimers, structural withdrawal from Ashford-controlled holdings. The estate did not collapse. It adapted, as it always did. But for the first time, it did so without him. And for the first time, Eleanor was not correcting a variable. She was losing one. Christian left the estate without ceremony. No announcement. No final conversation. Only a quiet exit from a structure that had always assumed he would remain inside it. And now, for the first time, he no longer did. Christian found Olivia in a place that had no intention of feeling like a destination. A small rented space on the edge of East London. Not a shop in the way she once had. Not a brand. Not a concept. Just a working room. Flowers in crates. Tools on a plain wooden table. No curated identity. No controlled aesthetic. Only function. He stood in the doorway for a moment without speaking. Olivia noticed him, but didn't react immediately. She continued trimming stems as if interruption was not unusual, just irrelevant. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said finally. "I didn't," Christian replied. A pause. Olivia didn't ask why. That was new between them, no longer forcing explanations immediately. Christian stepped inside. "I know what happened," he said quietly. Olivia finally looked at him. "Do you?" she said, not a question. "Yes," he replied. Silence settled. Not tension. Recognition. Christian placed something on the table. Not money. Not documents. A set of legal papers. Olivia didn't touch them immediately. "What is this?" she asked. "My exit," he said. That landed differently than anything before it. Because it wasn't explanation. It was consequence. Olivia studied him carefully. From them. Yes. Another pause. She set the scissors down. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, Christian replied. Why? Christian hesitated only briefly. Because I finally understood what neutrality meant in practice, he said. It meant letting decisions happen without responsibility for their impact. Olivia didn't respond immediately. For a moment, the distance between them felt like it had existed for months and also never existed at all. You lost everything, she said, her voice dropping the defensive edge. Christian looked at his hands, then at the modest space around them. I didn't lose it, Olivia. I traded it for the ability to look at you without feeling like a spectator in my own life. A long silence followed. No heavy metaphors, no structural analysis. Just the distant hum of East London outside. I have nothing to offer you but work, Olivia said finally, gesturing to the crates of unsorted flowers. No gallery, no Mayfair, no legacy. Good, he replied, taking a step toward the table. I'm tired of being an observer. Silence again. But this time it wasn't empty. It was space. Later, they began working, not rebuilding what was lost, not restoring what was removed, but constructing something that did not depend on systems that had already rejected or controlled them. No inherited capital, no institutional backing, no inherited name protection. Just two people starting from reduction instead of expansion. A small flower space that wasn't trying to impress anyone. A business that didn't scale, didn't signal status, didn't pretend permanence. It simply existed. Together. And over time, that became enough. Eleanor remained in her estate. Still powerful. Still structured. Still controlling systems that functioned exactly as designed. But something had changed in the geometry of her world. For the first time, the Ashford continuity felt less like a triumph of design and more like a perfectly preserved museum. Magnificent, silent, and entirely empty of the life it was meant to contain. Eleanor remained in her estate, a queen of a kingdom that was perfectly ordered and perfectly still. But every time she looked at the empty seat at her table, she was reminded that some things cannot be owned. In a small, nameless shop across the city, Christian handled a rough wooden crate, his hands dirty and his mind, for the first time in his life, entirely his own. They hadn't defeated the system. They had simply outgrown the need for it.